My Arab lover and the desert romance. The desert has always been a place of silence, mystery, and secrets hidden beneath endless skies. But I never imagined it would be the backdrop for a love that would challenge everything I thought I knew about myself. It began with a journey into unfamiliar lands, where I met a man whose presence was as powerful as the desert winds. His eyes carried both pride and pain, and from the first moment our paths crossed, something inside me shifted. What started as simple curiosity soon became an undeniable pull, a connection so intense it frightened me. This is not just a story about love. It is about desire, doubt, and the courage to embrace what we fear the most. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss the rest of this journey filled with tension, passion, and revelations that will leave you breathless. What happened between him and me in the desert was more than a romance. It was a discovery, one that changed both of us forever. Stay with me, because every word of this story brings you closer to a truth I never expected to find under the desert sun. The desert has a way of humbling you. No matter how prepared you think you are, the vastness makes you feel small, insignificant. I had come to the Middle East for work, but what I found beyond the crowded cities was a silence so powerful it seemed to strip me of all the noise I carried inside. My company had sent me to oversee a project on the outskirts of the desert, a development meant to merge tradition with modernity. Yet for me, it became something much more personal. The first time I saw him was not in a boardroom or a conference hall. It was under the burning sun, where sand stretched endlessly and the horizon melted into heat. He was on horseback, his figure framed by the golden light of dusk, his posture commanding yet graceful. His name, I would later learn, was Khalid, and from the first moment our eyes met, something inside me shifted. He wasn't dressed like the men in the city. Instead, he wore traditional Arab attire, the white fabric flowing against the wind, a keffiyeh wrapped loosely around his head. There was a nobility in the way he carried himself, a quiet strength that made me straighten instinctively. He slowed his horse as he approached me, his eyes dark, piercing, studying me with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "You're far from where most foreigners stay," he said in English, his voice deep, controlled, with an accent that rolled like the dunes around us. I adjusted my stance, trying not to look intimidated. I wanted to see the desert for myself. They say it teaches you things a city never could. He looked at me for a long moment before dismounting. When his boots touched the sand, he seemed even taller, his presence filling the space between us. "And what has it taught you so far?" I hesitated, then admitted that I'm more lost than I thought. For the first time, his expression softened. The corners of his lips lifted into something that wasn't quite a smile, but close. "Then maybe you are not here by mistake." We walked together toward a ridge of sand where the view stretched endlessly. The sun was setting, painting the horizon in strokes of red and orange. Khalid spoke little, but his silence was not uncomfortable. It was grounding, as if he carried with him the weight of generations, of stories buried in the sands. When he finally spoke again, his words caught me off guard. "You carry something heavy." I turned to him, surprised. "What makes you say that?" His gaze lingered on me, steady and unyielding. "Your eyes, they are searching for something." I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't. Maybe it was the desert stripping me of my defenses, or maybe it was his presence, intense, undeniable, that made honesty slip out. "I don't even know what I'm searching for," I confessed quietly. Khalid nodded, as if he understood more than I said. "The desert has a way of showing you truths you try to hide. It does not lie, and it does not let you lie to yourself." The wind picked up then, tugging at my clothes, carrying grains of sand across our skin. For a moment, I thought of turning back, of retreating into the safety of the city and its distractions. But something in his eyes held me there. We stood in silence as the sun disappeared, the coolness of night beginning to settle. When he finally spoke again, his tone was softer. "Stay. Come to my camp tonight. You shouldn't walk back alone." My heart stumbled in my chest. The invitation felt heavier than it should have, charged with something unspoken. I nodded, though my throat was dry. His camp was not far, a cluster of dark tents outlined against the twilight. Lanterns flickered, casting warm circles of light. Inside one of the tents, carpets lined the floor, cushions arranged in rich patterns of red and gold. He gestured for me to sit, and when I did, he poured tea into small glasses, the fragrance of mint filling the air. As we drank, he asked about my life, my work, my reasons for being in his country. His questions were not idle curiosity. They were sharp, as though he wanted to peel back layers I usually kept hidden. In return, he shared little about himself, only fragments. His family was influential, his responsibilities heavy, his life split between tradition and the modern world. But it wasn't his words that unsettled me. It was the way he looked at me when I spoke, as if he saw past everything I said into the thoughts I didn't dare to voice. At one point, I caught myself staring at the way the lantern light played on his features, the strong line of his jaw, the intensity of his eyes, the quiet power in the way he held himself. A flush of heat rose to my cheeks, and I quickly looked away, pretending to focus on the tea. Khalid noticed. I could feel it in the air between us, in the silence that stretched a little too long. Then, in a tone barely above the sound of the wind outside, he said, "You don't have to be afraid of what you feel here." My breath caught. Had he read my thoughts? My pulse quickened, my chest tightening with something between fear and longing. I wanted to ask him what he meant, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he leaned closer, his voice steady, low. "The desert strips away lies, even the ones we tell ourselves." The world outside the tent was silent, the night heavy with stars. Inside, his words hung between us, pulling me towards something I wasn't ready to name. And then, as if to seal the moment, the wind outside roared suddenly, rattling the tent. The lantern flickered, shadows dancing across his face. Khalid's eyes held mine, and I realized with a mix of dread and desire, something was about to change forever. The night in Khalid's camp stretched on like an endless horizon. I barely slept, not because the desert air was cold or because the ground beneath me was unfamiliar, but because every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. The intensity in his gaze lingered inside me, unsettling and magnetic all at once. When dawn broke, painting the sand in soft hues of gold, I rose quietly and stepped outside. The desert was silent, except for the gentle snore of his horse tied nearby. I thought I was alone until I heard his voice behind me. "You're awake early," Khalid said, his tone calm, almost amused. I turned, startled, and found him standing only a few feet away. He was dressed simply, a white thobe flowed with the breeze. His keffiyeh pulled back. The early light gave him an otherworldly aura, as if the desert itself had chosen him to embody its mystery. "I couldn't sleep," I admitted. "It feels overwhelming out here." He nodded knowingly. "The desert does that. It's too honest. It shows you what you carry inside, whether you want to see it or not." I wanted to ask him what he saw when he looked at me, but the words stuck. Instead, I followed him as he saddled his horse. He surprised me when he extended a hand. "Come, ride with me." For a moment, I hesitated. The closeness it implied made my pulse quicken, but something in his eyes, steady, unwavering, made me place my hand in his. He pulled me up onto the horse, and suddenly I was pressed against him, the warmth of his body radiating through the thin layers of fabric between us. We rode in silence, the horse's hooves kicking up soft clouds of sand. I felt every movement of his body, the strength of the way he held the reins, the steady rise and fall of his breathing. I tried to focus on the horizon, but all I could think about was him. "Tell me," Khalid said suddenly, his voice low, "what are you afraid of?" I stiffened. "Why do you assume I'm afraid?" "Because I can feel it," he replied without hesitation. "It's in the way you avoid looking at me too long, in the way your words stumble when silence gets too close." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Maybe I don't even know what I'm afraid of. He didn't press further. Instead, he guided the horse to a ridge overlooking the vast expanse of desert. From there, the world looked infinite, endless waves of sand glowing beneath the morning sun. He dismounted first, and then offered me his hand again. I took it, and when I landed on the ground, our hands lingered longer than necessary. "You don't trust easily," he said softly, almost as if speaking to himself. "Neither do you I countered, surprising even myself. His lips curved into a faint smile. Perhaps that is why we see each other so clearly. We stood there, the desert stretching before us, the silence between us heavy with things neither of us dared to say. And yet, something shifted in me. I felt drawn to him, not just by desire, but by the strange sense that he understood me in ways I hadn't even admitted to myself. Later, when we returned to the camp, Khalid prepared food, flatbread warmed over the fire, dates, and strong tea. He moved with quiet confidence, every gesture precise. I watched him, unable to tear my gaze away, and he noticed. "You look at me as though I am a question you cannot answer," he said, placing a plate before me. I flushed, embarrassed. "Maybe you are." His eyes lingered on me, and for a moment I thought he might say something more. But instead, he leaned back, sipping his tea in silence. The restraint in him was as captivating as it was frustrating. The rest of the day unfolded slowly. We walked together across the dunes, spoke about our families, our lives in fragments. He told me little of his own heart, but enough for me to glimpse the conflict inside him, the weight of expectation, the divide between tradition and modernity. By evening, the desert wind grew stronger, carrying with a storm. Sand whipped around us as we hurried back to his tent, the air thick with tension. Inside, the lantern flickered wildly, shadows darting across the canvas. I tried to calm my racing heart, but the storm outside felt like a mirror of the one inside me. Khalid sat close, his presence overwhelming. The sound of the wind made it hard to think, hard to breathe. Then it happened. His hand brushed against mine by accident, or maybe not. The contact was brief, but it sent a shock through me. My chest tightened, my breath caught. He didn't move his hand away immediately. Instead, he let it linger just close enough to make the air between us vibrate. When I finally looked at him, his eyes met mine with an intensity that made my pulse roar in my ears. The silence between us was no longer just silence. It was a choice, a question, a line neither of us knew how to cross. "Khalid," I whispered, my voice trembling. But before I could finish, a sudden shout cut through the storm. Someone outside the camp. Urgent voices. The sound of horses approaching fast. Khalid's expression hardened instantly. He rose to his feet, moving toward the entrance. "Stay inside," he said firmly. I sat frozen, my heart pounding. The storm outside was no longer just wind and sand. It carried something else with it, something that would change everything between us. And I knew, as his figure disappeared through the tent's flap, that nothing in my life would ever be the same after this night. The wind rattled the tent like a drum, carrying voices that sliced through the night. My pulse hammered in my ears as I clutched the edge of the carpet beneath me, every muscle tense. I had no idea who was outside or why they shouted Khalid's name, but the urgency in their tone was undeniable. I could hear him speaking, his voice low but commanding, though the words were lost in the storm. For a moment, I considered peeking outside, but his warning echoed in my mind. Stay inside. Minutes dragged like hours. My imagination spun wild. Bandits, soldiers, rivals. The desert, I realized, was not just sand and silence. It had its own dangers, hidden in the dark. Finally, the flap of the tent rustled, and Khalid stepped back inside. His expression was tight, his jaw clenched. He brushed sand from his thobe, but his eyes betrayed something heavier than dust. "What happened?" I asked, my voice thin. He hesitated, then sat across from me, the lantern casting sharp lines across his face. There was trouble nearby. A caravan attacked. Strangers moving through the dunes. It is not safe tonight. I swallowed hard. "And you? Are you in danger?" His gaze locked on mine, steady but unreadable. "Perhaps, but that is not for you to carry." Something inside me twisted. I wanted to press him, to demand the truth, but his silence was iron. Instead, I focused on the tremor in my hands. He noticed, without a word. He reached out, covering my hand with his. His touch was warm, grounding, and it silenced the storm inside me more than the one raging outside. "You are safe here," he said, softer now. The weight of those words pressed against my chest. "Safe. It had been so long since I'd felt that way. And yet here in the middle of the desert, with a man I barely knew, the word felt real. We stayed like that for a long time, his hand resting over mine, the silence between us no longer empty, but full of meaning. My eyes drifted to the lines of his face, the strength in his jaw, the calm in his gaze. Something stirred deep within me. Desire, yes, but also a longing I hadn't dared name. Khalid. I whispered, though I didn't know what I wanted to say. He tilted his head, waiting, his eyes searching mine. The air between us grew heavy, thick with all the words unspoken. I could feel my heart thundering, urging me to close the space, to surrender to whatever this was. But before I could move, a loud crack split the air outside. Not thunder, gunfire. Khalid's hand tightened around mine. Then he rose quickly, every movement sharp and precise. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice edged with steel. Panic surged. "No. What's happening?" He didn't answer. He slipped a dagger from beneath his cloak, the blade gleaming in the lantern light, then disappeared into the storm again. I sat frozen, fear crawling up my spine. Gunfire echoed once more, followed by shouts, the clash of voices. My mind screamed to run, but my body refused. All I could do was wait, every second a lifetime. At last, the noises subsided, swallowed by the desert wind. The tent flap opened, and Khalid returned, breathing heavily. His white throat was streaked with sand and dust, but no blood. Relief crashed over me like a wave. "They're gone," he said, lowering the dagger. "But we must be careful. The desert is watching." I wanted to ask what he meant, but the exhaustion in his eyes silenced me. He sank onto the carpet beside me, his shoulders heavy, his breath uneven. Without thinking, I moved closer, the instinct to comfort overwhelming fear. "You could have been killed," I whispered. He looked at me, and for a moment, his guard slipped. "Yes, but if fear keeps us from living, then we are already dead." His words struck me deeply. In that instant, I saw not just a man of authority and tradition, but someone carrying burdens heavier than I could imagine. And against all reason, I wanted to share them with him. I reached out, brushing sand from his sleeve. His eyes followed the gesture, dark and unreadable, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned slightly closer, the distance between us shrinking to almost nothing. The lantern flickered, shadows shifting, and I could feel his breath mingling with mine. My chest rose and fell rapidly, the world narrowing until it was only him, his eyes, his presence. It felt inevitable, the way the desert pulls the tide of your soul. I thought he would close the space, thought his lips would finally claim mine. My entire body leaned toward him, trembling with anticipation. But then, just as the moment reached its breaking point, he pulled back abruptly. His expression hardened, his jaw tight. "This cannot happen," he said, his voice rough, almost pained. The words cut through me, sharp as a dagger he had carried. My chest tightened, confusion and hurt colliding inside me. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. He stood, turning away from me, his silhouette cast in shadow against the lantern light. "Because some truths are too dangerous in this place. You don't understand what it would mean." My throat tightened, my heart pounding in my ears. "Then tell me," I demanded. "Let me understand." But he didn't answer. The storm outside had calmed, but inside the tent, another storm raged, one made of desire, fear, and a truth he refused to speak. And as I lay awake long after he had turned away, I knew one thing with certainty. Whatever he was hiding, whatever boundaries he thought could not be crossed, I was already too deep to turn back. The desert looked calmer the next morning, as if the storm and the gunfire had been nothing more than a fevered dream. But my chest told me otherwise. I had not slept, not after Khalid's words. This cannot happen. They echoed in my mind with every breath, every glance in his direction. He moved about camp as if nothing had changed. His face was composed, unreadable, the practiced mask a man used to hiding. He prepared the horses, checked supplies, and gave instructions to the men who had come in the night. I realized then he wasn't just another wanderer. There was authority in the way they listened to him, respect in the way they bowed their heads. When he finally returned to me, I asked the question that burned on my tongue. Who are you, really? His eyes flickered with something between caution and weariness. Someone with responsibilities you cannot imagine. That's not an answer. I pressed. He hesitated, then sighed. My family, they're known. Influential. What I do, even in the shadows of the desert, reflects on them. If I make one wrong choice, the consequences ripple far beyond myself. I studied him, the weight of his words settling in. I understood now why he pulled away, why he fought against what lingered between us. His life was not his own, but still I whispered, and what if that choice is the only thing that feels true? For the first time, his mask cracked. His eyes softened, his lips parted as if he might answer, but a shout cut through the air. One of his men ran toward us, his face pale with urgency. Trouble in the village, the man cried. Raiders. They've taken supplies, livestock. They've injured people. Khalid's entire body shifted into action. He grabbed his dagger, mounted his horse, and barked orders in Arabic I didn't understand. The men scrambled, armed and ready. Then he looked at me. You stay here, he commanded. Do not leave the camp. No, I said quickly. I can help. You don't have to. His tone sharpened. This is not your fight. Before I could protest further, he spurred his horse and disappeared across the dunes with his men, leaving me alone with the weight of my helplessness. Hours dragged on. The wind shifted, carrying faint echoes of shouting, then silence. I paced the tent, torn between obedience and the gnawing fear that something would happen to him. My mind replayed the memory of his hand over mine, the words he hadn't said, the space we hadn't crossed. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I mounted one of the spare horses, clumsy and unsure, and urged it toward the horizon. The desert swallowed me whole, every dune like a mountain, every shadow a threat. When I reached the village, smoke curled into the sky. The scene before me was chaos. Burned carts, frightened children, and men tending to wounds. My heart pounded as I searched for him, desperate, until I saw him near the well, speaking to a group of villagers. Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. His sleeve was torn, blood streaking down his arm. Khalid! I called, rushing to him. He turned, shock in his eyes. I told you to stay at camp, he snapped. You're hurt? I said, ignoring his anger. Let me help. He stared at me for a long moment, then allowed me to guide him into a quiet corner. I tore fabric from my shirt and wrapped it tightly around his wound, my hands trembling. He watched me, his gaze burning with something I couldn't name. You shouldn't have come, he said finally, his voice low. And leave you here like this? I couldn't. Our eyes met, and for once, neither of us looked away. The air between us grew thick, charged. I could feel his breath, his warmth, the unspoken words pressing against the walls we had built. Do you know what you risk by being near me? He asked, his voice trembling for the first time. Yes, I whispered, and I don't care. Something broke in him then. He leaned closer, his forehead almost touching mine. My heart raced, every nerve alive with anticipation. I wanted to close the space, to feel his lips against mine, to surrender to what had been building since the moment we met. But before it could happen, a cry rang out from the other side of the village. We turned to see villagers surrounding a young boy, injured badly, his leg crushed beneath debris. Without hesitation, Khalid pulled away and rushed to help, barking orders to his men. I followed, torn between frustration and admiration. He knelt beside the child, his hand steady as he reassured the terrified mother. He lifted the boy into his arms with strength that seemed unshakable, carrying him toward safety. And in that moment, watching him, I understood something deeper. Khalid wasn't just a man caught between tradition and desire. He was a protector, someone who would sacrifice himself for others without hesitation. That was the weight he carried, the reason he pulled away from me. As the villagers crowded around, thanking him, he glanced back at me. His eyes locked with mine, and for an instant I saw it, the truth he fought so hard to bury. Desire, longing, fear. But before I could move toward him, before I could break the invisible wall, one of his men approached and whispered in his ear. Khalid's face darkened. He turned to me, his jaw tight. "We have to leave," he said, urgency in his tone. "Why? What's happening?" I asked. He mounted his horse, his eyes sweeping the horizon. They weren't just raiders. Someone sent them. My stomach dropped. Sent them? For you? His silence was answer enough. And as the sun sank behind the dunes, casting long shadows over the ruined village, I realized the desert held more than secrets of the heart. It held dangers neither of us could outrun. We rode in silence through the night, the desert stretching endlessly before us. The stars burned brighter than I had ever seen, but even their light couldn't calm the storm inside me. Khalid had said the raiders were sent, that someone wanted to hurt him, maybe destroy him. And still, all I could think about was the way his eyes had betrayed everything he refused to say aloud. When we finally reached the safety of his camp, exhaustion pulled at us. His men kept watch on the dunes, their silhouettes dark against the horizon. Inside the tent, the lantern cast a soft glow, and for the first time in days, the world outside felt distant. I turned to him, my voice breaking. "You can't keep shutting me out. You risked your life for those villagers, for me, for everyone, and yet you act like this thing between us doesn't exist." His shoulders tensed. He removed his keffiyeh slowly, his hands shaking in a way I had never seen. "It does exist," he admitted, his voice rough, raw. "And that terrifies me more than any enemy in the desert." My breath caught. The words I've been aching to hear finally spilled into the space between us. Fragile but real. Then why keep running from it? He looked at me then, really looked, his eyes burning with conflict. "Because if I choose this, if I choose you, I betray everything I was raised to protect. My family, my duty, my name." I stepped closer, my chest tight. "And if you don't choose it? If you bury it forever?" His silence was louder than the storm that had shaken our camp days before. I reached out, my hand brushing his arm, and for the first time, he didn't pull away. "Maybe courage isn't in carrying everyone else's expectations," I whispered. "Maybe it's in finally allowing yourself to live." The wall between us shattered. He closed the space, his forehead resting against mine, his breath trembling. I could feel the weight of his struggle, the years of restraint, and the desperate longing beneath it all. When his lips finally met mine, it wasn't gentle. It was fierce, a release of everything we had both been holding back. The kiss was fire and surrender, the desert itself breathing through us. His hands gripped my shoulders, mine tangled in the folds of his thobe, and for a moment, nothing else existed. Not the raiders, not his family's name, not the dangers waiting outside. Only us, caught in the truth we had both feared. When we finally pulled apart, his chest heaved, his eyes glistening. "I can't promise this will be easy," he said. "There will be battles ahead, against others and against myself." I smiled faintly, though tears burned my eyes. "I'm not asking for easy. I'm asking for real." He exhaled shakily, then nodded, as if sealing a vow. "Then real is what you'll have." The days that followed blurred together. The danger outside the camp never disappeared, but something inside us had changed. We spoke more honestly. We laughed in rare moments of peace, and we learned to navigate the fragile line between fear and hope. The desert still demanded caution, but now it also held possibility. One evening, as we sat beneath the stars, Khalid said quietly, "The desert taught me many things. Strength, silence, duty, but you've taught me something it never could, that even in the harshest places, love can exist." I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "And love is stronger than duty, stronger than fear." He didn't answer, but the way he looked at me was enough. As I tell this story now, I know our path will never be simple, but what I learned under the desert sun is this: hiding from the truth doesn't protect you, it destroys you. Courage is choosing what sets your soul on fire, even when the world tells you to turn away. So I ask you, listen to my story, what truths are you running from? What parts of yourself have you buried out of fear of judgment? Maybe it's time to face them, because sometimes the most dangerous choice is also the one that sets you free. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who believes love can bloom even in the harshest deserts.